Welcome back, everybody. Broadcasting live from Parliament this morning ahead of what's expected to be a very, very closely watched and interesting, fine balanced. I'm using all of the terms that I possibly can to describe this midterm budget that our Finance Minister, Pravin Gordhan, is expected to deliver this afternoon. You know, I remember when we were here ahead of the budget, we got the privilege of seeing our Finance Minister walking in early in the morning and grabbing him for a little chat, but not sure that's going to happen today, unfortunately. The budget happening later on this afternoon at around about 2 o'clock, so the chances of catching him early this morning, I'm sure, a little bit slim. But nonetheless, we are here and we're ready to catch anybody that does walk in. And somebody who we have caught is quite a big fish, I have to tell you. Dennis Dykes, the chief economist from Nedbank, here to talk to us about some expectations that we can hopefully see coming out of this particular midterm budget. Good morning. Good to see you here this morning.
Morning. Thank you.
You know, one thing I didn't talk about during the opening, and I think one that's going to steal a little bit of time during, well, we hope, during the Finance Minister's talk is the fees must fall and the talk of free education that varsity students are demanding. Can we expect the Finance Minister to address this? We hope he will, because we would not like to see scenes that happened last year.
Well, look, at the very least, he has to explain how he's going to get the additional funds for the moving the 8%, potentially 8% at various universities down to 0% for families that are earning less than 600,000 Rand. But I think, yes, on a broader level, I think he has to actually cover how potentially, if there were no fees, how that could be covered, whether it would be through increased taxation or cutting expenditure elsewhere. And obviously that's never very really popular in other departments.
Yeah. So there's not really much that our Finance Minister can say about this. I mean, this is obviously decisions that have to be made higher up, but he can allude to it. And I imagine that these students that have been protesting and asking for this are going to be looking for some direction in this particular midterm.
Yes, look, it's not his portfolio,
yeah.
but I think it's his job to actually explain, if that was taken as a decision, really what would actually be needed.
Yeah, I mean, just for viewers, just to remind you, I mean, it was last year this time that we saw this particular area full of students that came through these gates and that were demanding answers from the then Finance Minister, Nhlanhla Nene, as to how he was going to ensure that this that at that time there was not going to be an increase in the fees. So we're going to see what happens today. No words whether or not students will be here, but I'm sure there'll be some presence. So that's the fees must fall, but there's another big issue, and that of course is the ratings agencies that are going to be watching very, very closely. We keep talking about these ratings agencies, but I don't think we can emphasize enough how important it is that South Africa is not put in junk status. Try and give us an understanding of what it would be like if we were put into junk.
No, look, I think unfortunately what it means is that as a country you're paying more for all your debt. So it would be the banks, their cost of capital goes up. That means they have to put up interest rates for the person in the street. It's government that actually has to pay more money, which obviously means that there's less money to actually spend on things like fees must fall and on other worthy causes. And obviously that then rolls through the economy. You have less employment, GDP is lower, and unfortunately it probably means structurally lower, because normally it would take you something like 5 years, even more, to actually convince agencies that you've now taken the corrective action. So much better to actually take remedial action before it actually happens and avoid the downgrade. And hence the huge drive by Minister Gordhan since he came into office, but particularly from around about January, February, to try and actually avert this. So they've done a huge amount in coordinating business and labour, coming up with various plans, coming up with that small business fund, coming up with some solutions for youth unemployment, and really trying to actually get growth up more structurally to avoid this nasty situation. Is
that what the rating agencies are looking for today? How the Finance Minister and the plans that he's going to put in place to grow South Africa's economy, are those the keys they're looking for more than anything? Is that the key they would like to see?
Absolutely,
okay.
Because with higher growth comes higher taxation, which means that the government's actually got more in the way of resources, which means that they can sustain higher levels of expenditure, which means this whole story around fiscal consolidation becomes quite easy. So they want to see that structurally you're on a path to higher growth and that you're not destroying growth, which unfortunately some of the signals that we have sent out over the last few years seemingly is actually in contradiction to that.
Yeah. We also, of course, are sitting in expectations of higher taxes. I mean, that's something that he has alluded to, is increasing the taxes, and also the fact of cutting government spending. Again, those are some clues we're looking for. What are your expectations on this?
Yeah, look, he has to show that he's on a path to lower budget deficits and stabilizing public debt below 50% of GDP, or around about 50% of GDP. That's really the goal that the medium-term budget policy statement sets out, apart from, of course, allocating these scarce resources. And to do that, either you need stronger growth, or you have to actually increase tax rates or reduce expenditure. And by far the more favorable is to actually boost economic growth to achieve that aim.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just on a closing note, there's also a lot of people looking for some clues when it comes to, or clarity on South Africa's energy policy, because I think that's a little bit up in the air. People are not sure, is nuclear happening, what's happening, the amount being spent on it. Your predictions once again?
Well, unfortunately, there does seem to be a strong sort of desire to go the nuclear route, which could be very, very expensive fiscally. Eskom have told us that they want to do it off their balance sheet, but unfortunately their balance sheet is the country's balance sheet, and the fiscus's balance sheet, because ultimately government guarantees their loans. So again, I think some clarity is needed. That and another issue would be things like the national health plan as well, which is also very, very expensive. So these are clearly things which over the medium term could very much impact the fiscus negatively, and would require some action from the part of the minister to actually ensure that sufficient funds are there.
All right. Dennis Dykes, thank you so much for talking to us this morning. And I'm sure you're going to get a lot out of it this afternoon. And so will all of us. At 2 o'clock this afternoon, our finance minister expected to deliver that midterm budget. And you can hear the pressures that are on him right now. And that's just the economy of the country, not to mention what's happening on the political front. And that's another issue that we'll be discussing a little bit later on this morning. So do stay tuned to Morning Live.